Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you may be joining us from today. My name is Paul Rosen, and I am proud to be the Executive Chairman of globalgo, Cannabis's leading global advisory servicing clients on all major continents. Today's webinar topic is the future of the Swiss cannabis market. Today's program marks the 10th webinar that globalgo has produced. And as always, we are grateful to both our engaged audience and our content providers. Our webinars have shined a light on emerging new cannabis jurisdictions, including Colombia and South Africa, as well as emerging new novel therapies involving psychedelics. Now, when I think of Switzerland, it brings to mind a number of really positive associations, including the breathtaking vistas of the Swiss Alps, a global leader in banking, admittedly some of the most delicious chocolate and cheese produced anywhere in the world, precision fine timepieces, and pharmaceutical innovation. In fact, Albert Hofmann was a Swiss chemist known best for being the first person ever to synthesize, ingest, and learn of the psychedelic effects of lysergic acid, otherwise known as LSD. Now we can legitimately add cannabis to that list, as Switzerland has quietly become a pioneer in the global movement towards sensible cannabis reform. globalgo has identified Switzerland as an emerging and important jurisdiction that will undoubtedly play a pivotal role towards the continued commercialization of the plant. And we are thrilled to have recently opened up our own office in Zurich alongside our colleague and panelist for today, Andrew Petronanos from Fineleaf, to help us participate in this incredible opportunity. Switzerland was really early. I don't think people really understand that Switzerland decriminalized minor cannabis possession in 2012, becoming one of the first countries anywhere in the world to do so. And Switzerland has made several advancements in developing progressive laws around cannabis and CBD. By legalizing sales of low-THC cannabis and CBD, Switzerland has positioned itself as an obvious and attractive option for domestic and international cannabis businesses looking to enter and springboard into the European market. In Switzerland, the government has adopted kind of a unique stance when we compare it to other jurisdictions with regards to possession of cannabis. If it contains less than 1% THC, then it's legal to purchase, possess, and consume the substance. In order to sell cannabis products legally, there are certain regulations that must be adhered to. Notably, CBD is exempt from the Narcotics Act as it does not produce a high. So these are important distinctions that really give a lot of momentum towards the development of the burgeoning Swiss cannabis industry. Furthermore, it should be noted that CBD products, as mentioned, are legal as long as they don't contain a THC content of greater than 1%. Anyone that's paying attention to Europe is aware that there's a pretty hot and very important contest going on between whether CBD is going to be classified as a narcotic or as sort of a novel food additive. And we're certainly pulling at globalgo for the latter interpretation, which is consistent with health and safety and also will help ignite the commercialization of what will be a massive market. Now, I'm going to stop telling you about Switzerland because we have some of the great minds and participants in what's happening in Switzerland, helping us to understand and navigate this incredible and likely explosive opportunity. Let's then get to today's program because we have a lot of ground to cover. First, I'm so thrilled and delighted to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Peter Steger. Peter is the owner of Heidak AG and Spagyrik Produktions AG. He's the chairman of IG Medcan, which is the Swiss Association of Pharmaceutical Companies Producing Cannabis Medicines. As mentioned, he's the managing director of Spagyrik Produktions, a producer of cannabis extracts, and is one of the leading lights in the emerging Swiss industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce and introduce you to Peter Steger.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the very kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Good evening for me, but for most of you, probably afternoon or morning. Paul Rosen already introduced myself quite well. Again, so I am speaking to you tonight actually with the hat of the chairman of the Swiss Association of Pharmaceutical Companies producing cannabis medicine, but also I am the managing director of a company that is producing, we are a GMP production site. We are producing cannabis extracts for Dr. Manfred Fankhauser. That means for his Bahnhof Apotheke Langnau, Switzerland's leading distribution and advice center. I'm quite sure if you have taken a look on the Swiss market, you would have recognized the name of Manfred Fankhauser. This is a special situation in Switzerland at the moment. We have 2 pharmacy stores, more or less, that are able to distribute cannabis medicine. This is not a lot. This is due to some historical reasons, a bit strange or not very complicated. It's actually a funny story, but takes me too long with that keynote. So at the moment, it's like a monopoly at the moment. We take part of that monopoly, but also we want to break it up because it's time to open it up. Yeah, since 2011, actually, we are producing cannabis extracts in cooperation with Markus Lüdi from Canna Farm. You maybe have heard his name as well, for Manfred Fankhauser, as I mentioned, the one pharmacy store that is able to distribute. We have all necessary permits from the BAG. The BAG is the National Health, Federal Office of Public Health, BAG. We have the permits for the production, cultivation, and distribution of cannabis medicine. So what I'm talking about, my part tonight is focusing on the cannabis medicine. That means more than 1% of THC. Well, I said we have these authorizations now from the BAG. This was not always easy. You can probably imagine. To maintain and obtain this authorization, you have to talk a lot with the authorities at the time when everything was very unclear. So over the years, we got to know each other better. We had our downs and our ups. The moment it looks better. The BAG, so Federal Office of Health, is including us as well. And we started by ourselves some years ago to support and help shape a political motion. That means, I don't know if you know that word, a motion. A member of the National Council can fill in or hand in such kind of a motion that brings the parliament to debate over some changement of law, for example. So we got aware that there was a national council member that handed in such a motion, which was not very well shaped, but the direction was good. And we then helped him on the way, which was very interesting for me because I had no experience in that field. So I was able to write his notes, what he read in front of the parliament. So that was very, very interesting for me. And I learned a lot on the way. And the aim of this motion is to, you know, at the moment, maybe I have to start with what we have now. We are under the restrictions as it was in Germany before March 2017. So you can get cannabis medicine, but you have to have authorization, an individual authorization by the BAG, by the Federal Office of Public Health. And this is quite, for the doctors and also for the patients, quite a lot of work and nerve-wracking, and also, of course, quite a lot of work for the BAG because more or less there are at the moment 3,000 authorizations, actual authorizations for 3,000 people to get cannabis medicine. This is quite a lot. If you compare, if I have the figures right, in Germany, before they opened up the whole thing in March 2017, they had, I think, well, I don't remember exactly, but I think less than 3,000 authorizations, and Germany is quite bigger, much bigger than Switzerland. So this was also one of the reasons the BAG decided the special character of these special authorizations is not given anymore if they are over 3,000 actual authorizations. So this is one point where we got them, maybe because it was a lot of work for them as well, to deal with those quests. And so we probably were at the right time with those political motions. So it went all through the different chambers and everything. So it looks actually quite well. At the moment, the government also supports that. So now it is back to the BAG to make the law. I don't want to make it so long here, but actually we didn't invent like a new article, but we change an existing article and open it up now for having this facilitated access to cannabis, to medicine. That means the doctor prescribes it on a narcotic recipe, and then the patient will get it. This is our goal, and it's looking good. But to strengthen our cause, we founded then an association of all cannabis medicine manufacturers in Switzerland. This is this IG Medcan, which I am at the moment, for whom I am the what's the word again? Chairman. And this year, at the suggestion of the BAG, a new umbrella organization was set up. It's called the SACM, stands for Switzerland's Association for Cannabis Medicine. It's kind of a follow-up organization of already existing organization under Rudolf Brenneisen. You probably have heard that name as well if you take a closer look on the Swiss market. And this umbrella organization now is mainly composed of scientists and doctors. And I have the honor of representing our Association of Cannabis Manufacturer on the board of this new umbrella organization. As a board member there, I have the duty, or my tasks are in the field of politics and law, especially the negotiation with health insurance companies is on my desk, part of my current work. Not so easy, but it's one of the important things we have to take a very close look on now. So that's where we are now. Where we're heading to, and in a time frame, I would say it takes some more months, maybe 1.5 years, until everything is worked out and we have the new situation. Now, but we have to be very careful. We have to shape it carefully. So there are some open points. For example, the general quality standards of cannabis medicine. Although this is in the cannabis medicine branch, it is not the most important point. It's probably more important for the cannabis, for the CBD industry, because we have GACP, GMP, GDP in the end. So we are quite under restrictions already. So regarding to the quality standards, but still this discussion is very important to lead now. Then the whole reimbursement in the future regarding the fact that the proof of effectiveness, dealing with magistral recipes is not simple to fulfill. To write that down, because always a very complicated word, effectiveness, and also very complicated to negotiate about that with health insurance companies, because in Switzerland, most part of the cannabis medicine that is getting prescribed is magistral recipes. You know, you hopefully know that name. It takes me too long to explain, but it's not a finished product. So that means there is no clinical studies, especially on that product. We are doing stuff and we have stuff, but still it's not like a finished product. So the health insurance companies, of course, say first, no, you have no proof of effectiveness for that special medicament, medicine. Now we take a closer look on other situations. Maybe the UK is a good example how it could work with those double opinions and further on. So that is my focus at the moment, to look how we can deal that out. So this is very important, but also very important will be, and I finish the next second, sorry, the education of the doctors. This is very important. I think I can imagine that doctors are not very willing to prescribe cannabis when they don't know nothing about it. So still, if you have the new situation with the easier access to cannabis, that doesn't really mean that we sell much more and the patient gets it much easier. We have pressure from the patients. They're interested in the cannabis medicine, but the doctors they're interested, but a bit reluctant because of lack of knowledge. So this is a very important point, to get this education to the universities and so on. So I see I'm already long. So thank you very much for your ear, and I give the word back to Paul.
That was very cool and very informative, Peter. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights. You know, for our audience, it's not just the medical cannabis or the hemp industries that Sweden has shown leadership on. There's currently a government recently launched a pilot program to start exploring cannabis trials for recreational use. And it's estimated that there's about 20,000 cannabis users in Switzerland, which would create essentially a market valued at about $500 million, not Swiss francs. But with the population being close to 9 million people, I think it's fair to say that that 20,000 number is probably very, very low, and likely, like, you know, many other countries, once legalization takes root, you could anticipate up to 20% of the population exploring some versions of cannabis consumption, whether it's smoking, vaping, eating, topicals, what have you. So it's a big market we're talking about, and it's well positioned to really become a hub for distribution into the rest of the continent. And our panelists, I'm sure, are going to unpack some of these ideas. I'm so thrilled to introduce today's moderator, my friend and my business partner, Tom Zuber. Tom's the eponymous founder and managing partner of Zuber Lawler, one of the top law firms in America, voted recently best cannabis law firm in America just in the last few months. Tom is also a founder and a partner at globalgo, the advisory that I'm pleased to executive chair. Tom's really been at the cutting edge of both cannabis, patent, and trademark laws. Just one small example out of many. He's managed teams that have applied innovative strategies to obtain meaningful federal trademark protection for cannabis brands in the US, and the second ever issued US plant patent for a cannabis strain. So Tom, you could take it away and you'll lead our panel.
Thank you, Paul. And it's great to be on this panel, this webinar with you, my dear friend and colleague at globalgo. I'm very excited about this panel and our panelists. I'm excited to learn more about Switzerland. And I'd like to start by introducing our panelists so we can go ahead and dive into these questions. So I'll start with our friend and colleague, Andrew Petronanos, who is the founder of Fineleaf. And Andrew, if you and the other panelists could make a brief introduction about your company and yourselves as we proceed, that would be very helpful for the audience. And if you could also, Andrew, in your case, describe the relationship between Fineleaf and globalgo, I think that might be helpful and interesting to the audience as well.
Thank you very much, Tom. My name is Andrew Petronanos. I represent and founded a company called Fineleaf just over a year ago. And I've had now the chance and fortunate to join the globalgo team on the rollout of helping the cannabis industry globally evolve, whether that's companies coming into the industry or wanting to expand into new industries. Just a little bit about what we started. So since our inception just over a year ago, we very much focus on the capital raising aspect of the medical cannabis and hemp industry in Europe and Switzerland. We found quickly that most of the companies were primarily looking for sourcing their capital from North America with either a promise of an IPO or acquired by a reverse takeover. Since we know the capital markets going down last year, it's been very hard for us to source funding. But also what we found, especially in Europe, companies that were looking to raise capital were either not ready to raise capital, or we found that we couldn't find the right teams representing that company. So a lot of difficulties, but that's where we saw the opportunity to start helping those companies structure their business the right way. And this is primarily where our relationship comes with globalgo, and for everybody listening, where we can really help those companies achieve great things as cannabis grows globally. So without further ado, thank you, of course, as always, to globalgo and everybody that managed to come on board to discuss with us what is going on in Switzerland. And I hope that you can hear from everybody here some of the great things that companies are doing in Switzerland and how we can create the future of the Swiss cannabis space.
Thank you, Andrew. And our next panelist, Dr. Sandra Schoenes, founder of Heidi's Garden. Heidi, if you could, Dr. Schoenes, tell us a bit about yourself and Heidi's Garden, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Tom. So my name is Sandra Schoenes. I'm a medical doctor from background. And I have worked a couple of years as a surgeon in hospitals in Switzerland, but also abroad. And so after my experience as, let's say, healthcare provider, but also as a consultant to pharmaceutical companies, helping them to launch innovative, mostly single compound medications to the market, and I was helping them also to get better access to those drugs. I stumbled across the cannabis plant, and I was just so amazed about the therapeutic potential of this plant. And with that, I mean, not only for patients who are really ill, but also for the more or less healthy people who can still improve their well-being or their health. And that has driven me also to co-found the two companies, Heidi's Garden and Reyos. And Heidi's Garden is a premium multi-brand CBD retailer, but also producing and distributing their own CBD products. And Reyos, on the other hand, is covering the scientific aspects. So there, our mission is to develop and distribute evidence-based medical cannabis products and bring them to the Swiss and later the European market.
Thank you, Sandra. And our next panelist would like to bring up to the screen Roger Koch, CEO and founder of HEIMAT. Roger, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your company, that would be helpful. You're on mute, Roger.
All right, do you hear me, Tom?
Yes, yes, I can. Please.
Okay,
thanks, Roger.
No problem, sorry. So my name is Roger Koch. I've been an entrepreneur since 2004 when I started my first company, Diction, and that was in a completely different business. That was translation. After selling my first company, I finally put into practice a long-cherished childhood dream. And that was a little crazy because that was, I wanted always to have my own cigarette brand. So I was a complete virgin. I didn't have any clue about anything. So that was a real, and still is a real adventure, existentially threatening, and the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. We launched the first real cigarette only containing Swiss tobacco in 2016, and launched in July 2017 the world's first tobacco hemp combined cigarette that was industrially produced. And last year we created a machine that can be added to any traditional tobacco maker in order to produce pure hemp cigarettes, so without any nicotine. And we're able to produce several thousand sticks a minute, so it's really industrial. We're currently selling all our products in Switzerland and pure hemp cigarettes, as well as hemp flowers in Luxembourg and Belgium. And hopefully more markets will follow by the end of this year, but Europe's really hard to enter.
Thank you very much, Roger. And our next panelist to bring up on the screen, please, Yannik Schlup, CSO of PureGene, and also the founder of PureGene. If you could tell us, Yannik, about PureGene and yourself, a brief bit, that would be helpful for the audience.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to share some insights today from our activities in the last few years. About myself, my name is Yannik. I've always had a big interest in medicine and plants and plant breeding, and how the course happened to be in the last years is I've met the founder of Pure Holding. And with my background in agronomy and plant breeding together, we started having the idea around breeding and developing cannabis. And this is the course it took that I've co-founded PureGene. I'm CSO there and chairing the board, apologies, member of the board of Pure Holding. And in this combination, Pure Holding financing its subsidiary PureGene as one of the market leaders out there. I'm very excited to give you the insights of the, say, latest developments on cannabis and hemp breeding, how the THC regulations are ongoing in Europe and Switzerland. And maybe briefly to give some background, Pure Holding is the market leader, I dare say, in Switzerland with roughly 90 employees. There's 6 subsidiaries. We're active internationally. And today I will represent PureGene and its scientific and R&D activities. Thanks very much for organizing. Thanks to globalgo. Excited to share some more information today.
Thank you, Yannik. And our final panelist to bring up on the screen, Dr. John Trepp, founder, GBTPharma. If you could, Dr. Trepp, tell us a bit about yourself and GBTPharma, that would be helpful.
Okay, thanks Tom Paul for having us here tonight. It's a really great honor to be here amongst all those high level or high value panelists here. So my name is John Trepp. I'm a commercial director of Creso Pharma. I'm from training, I'm a biochemist, and I work over 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry in various positions. Creso Pharma is an Australian company. We're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, but we have our operational headquarters here in Switzerland. We are operational in as we say, Australia. We have greenhouses and growing facility for cannabis in Canada, Colombia, and as I said before, in Switzerland. We're currently active in about 15 countries globally. We focus on human health and animal health, and in Canada, especially on the recreational cannabis side, but we're also moving there into medicinal cannabis. In the human or in the CBD in Europe, we're focusing mainly on the CBD products, and our aim is there to produce innovative delivery systems covering areas with unmet medical needs, such as, for example, stress, anxiety, also both in humans and animals, and then establish, high reputation or high quality reputation with medicinal hemp cannabis products in human animal health. And then we actually do not distribute our products ourselves, but we work with high reputation commercial partnerships globally. So that's a little bit our aim. And I'm really glad to be here and to share my insights with the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trepp. And so I'd like to direct our first question for this panel, this quite a esteemed and accomplished panel, toward the panel at large. So please, anyone feel free to ask these questions. Also, even if I direct the question to any particular panelist, this is a conversation. So other panelists should please feel free to weigh in on those person-specific questions as well. So our first question here, it was very helpful to get Peter's take on where the industry is currently and how it got here. What are the biggest lessons learned from these past years within the Switzerland hemp market? And again, this is a question for the panel at large, and I think that's a good place to start off here.
I think, Yannik, do you want to go ahead? Maybe you guys have done a bit more rigorous work, and since you are currently allowed to cultivate or do your research on THC, maybe you can talk a bit about the regulation and your experience.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. Glad to do so. So I'll first talk about the lessons learned and then the directions we're taking. Switzerland has been one of the pioneers, and it wasn't obvious for long with the regulation set forth this 1% THC limit, not having CBD on the schedule. And then 2016 already, production has taken off in Switzerland, and then particularly 2017, there was a boom around CBD production cultivation. And the advantage in Switzerland is twofold. One is the regulatory and legal aspect, and the other one is the location. We have highly educated people and the experience. We started early, naturally there is the experience. So even if this regulatory advantage is going to change and other countries raise the bar to 1% THC limit, we still have a lot of advantages from experience. At the same time, talking more so oriented towards the future, Switzerland is one of the, say, world's leading innovators, particularly in development of applying academic insights onto the real world market. And Pure Holding funds its PureGene subsidiary, since we have identified one of the major gaps in cannabis since it's been illegal for ages, which is developing novel cannabis varieties. So imagine, it's a bit dark over here because it's night. Imagine 20 years ago, cannabis was illegal, corn has been bred, soy has been bred, and in cannabis there was just this big gap. And we decided to fill this by sequencing, I'll get into this later, the pangenome, so having the entirety of the DNA sequenced of the cannabis plant. And then from this, we currently have massive field trials going on, THC and low THC. We can pinpoint where those traits of the plants are located in the DNA. And through creating this knowledge, we can then tailor-make varieties by just picking the right parents, crossing them, and selecting this very interesting offspring. Which leads me to the Thc permit. Lots of the work has been done in THC, naturally, illegally, but never professionally. And this authorization by the Federal Office of Health that Peter talked about before, we have received 4 of those permits. One is just to conduct research, so to understand why does a THC plant have higher yields than a CBD plant? And then we can deduce this and breed CBD plants with higher yields and those resistances. And at the same time, Switzerland is opening up the field as one of the countries that wants to be a pioneer in regulating the hemp space and cannabis space in Europe. And we had again applied for an authorization to cultivate high THC cannabis. And now we hold a permit to research and develop those varieties. At the same time, we have about 1 acre, so 5,000 plants, high THC plants on the field to get in data to evaluate if they can be cultivated under organic production principles. And lastly, then introduce those genotypes into our breeding pipeline, which gives us very solid varieties for our cultivation activities in Pure Holding, but also the incredible opportunity to tap into the THC potential as one of the many of this plant and start offering it.
Thank you, Yannik. I appreciate that. My next question is directed toward Dr. Schoenes. If you could tell us, please, about the current situation in Switzerland relating to the CBD oils, the sale of CBD oils, and also what are the trends going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as I've been pointed out, since end of 2016, beginning of 2017, CBD products have been made legal in Switzerland. With up to a THC of 1%. And Switzerland at the beginning was, I think, although they had a clear idea about the novel food recommendations, were also very permissive, I would say. But then 2019, with the rescheduling of CBD as a novel food, it became a bit more difficult as a producer to sell CBD oil as food. Depends a bit on the area, the canton in Switzerland. But now many companies started to sell CBD oils not as food anymore, but as, for example, as a chemical substance, as a workaround, these novel food recommendations of the European Commission that Switzerland also decided to follow. And in terms of trend, I think Switzerland is probably quite similar to US or other European countries in terms of the quality challenges, meaning there are, according to a study done in 2019, about 1/3 of the companies that don't have exact labels on the product saying what is really inside. And then there are also issues like pesticides in some products found. But what I think is very interesting is a bit more the type of products. And there I've seen a market research from Germany from beginning of the year, where they have seen that about 88% of all CBD oils sold were phytocannabinoid enriched products. So a full spectrum with added CBD isolate. And the remaining 12% were CBD oils made out of CBD isolate. And I think in Switzerland, it's probably not so extreme, but it's going a bit in this direction, so that it's actually not so easy anymore to find a pure full spectrum oil made out of a good, strong therapeutic genetic. And to me, that speaks to the fact that the consumers are not really educated or well educated, which is not surprising. It's a new market. So the consumer is a bit overwhelmed when it comes to choosing a good product for him or herself. And I think that's also our responsibility as the industry to invest in education of the consumer and to make clear that efficacy and effectiveness does not only depend on the CBD concentration, but on many other factors.
Thank you, Doctor. And you touched on a point that I'd like to hit to elaborate on, if you would. You had mentioned pesticides and those sorts of things in products, and how really it's necessary for Switzerland and for Europe as a whole to focus, as it is for every other part of the world, on I guess you could say a trust, as far as labeling compliance, that being able to have a confidence on the part of consumers that what is in the package as per the label is actually in the package. So a related conversation, of course, is the illegal market, the unlicensed market. Here in California, I'm sitting in our Los Angeles office. Actually, I'm sitting at home, but typically sitting in our Los Angeles office. And here in California, this is going to be a fantastical statistic when you first hear it, because it is 80%, it's estimated by some, up to 80% of the market, the cannabis market in California, is illegal. And that's quite a statistic, obviously. And of course, when something blows up, when you have a vape pen, as an example, that blows up in the hands of a child, it's national news. And it doesn't say illegal vape pen or unlicensed vape pen blows up in the hands of a child. It says cannabis vape pen blows up in the hands of a child. So it's a blow to the whole industry, as well as obviously to companies that are doing their best to comply and to pay their taxes and so forth. Have you seen that sort of issue in Switzerland as far as a growth of an illegal industry, or a persistence of an illegal industry that is hampering the ability of the legalized, the licensed industry in Switzerland and throughout Europe to have this conversation of trust with the audience?
So in my experience, but maybe they can hand over also the question to Roger Koch. I'm not so much aware of things beside these the marijuana that has been what is the name, that has been mixed with these synthetic THCs that really created some severe illnesses and casualties. So that was a big factor that was kind of threatening the reputation of the industry. As you say, you know, at the end, do people understand that this was illegal? But I would say just more in the area of the CBD also, there's really this movement now from the industrial from the hemp society in Switzerland that is trying to come up with quality label, so kind of a self-regulation from the hemp industry to come up with a better quality than would otherwise be the case.
Very good. Thank you, Doc. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to jump in here. I mean,
please.
I'm only speaking for the recreational market, and that was Heidi who said that there has been a huge problem with, let's say, artificial THC that has been sprayed on CBD. And we have to be aware, I mean, the legal situation in Switzerland, in my view, is not that clear for every product. I mean, for example, when we launched the smokables in the beginning, I mean, we had a lot of calls from consumers stating that the police imposed fines for smoking a legal product. They just didn't know in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And we are now trying to expand our products, let's say, to make a tea or to make a sweet or something. In this field, we find a lot of trouble also from the government. They don't know how to classify the product. They don't know where is really the CBD THC level that is allowed or not. So I think education of the people, okay, yeah, that's true. That's for sure necessary, but also for, I mean, on the government level. So we've been in touch with a lot of chemists in chemistry, in St. Gallen, in our canton. And they say, hey, we have no clue. We don't know what is really legal and what is not. We just can help you and give us their idea, but they're not sure. Not about edibles, not about, let's say, selling moon rocks is, I mean, illegally if you ask the government, but everybody does it. So there's a huge gap between practice and theory, and we see that in Europe even on a much crazier level. I could tell you stories. I mean, it's crazy, but just for Switzerland, it's much clearer in Europe, but it's not that clear if you really want to launch a new product.
Very helpful. And Roger, while we're on you, I'd love to get more of a lay of the land here, an update as to the status of things in Europe and in Switzerland. And in your case, if you could tell us, please, Roger, about the status, the legal situation, if you will, in relation to pure hemp smokables and flowers throughout Europe and inclusive of Switzerland.
I mean, for Switzerland, it's quite clear. Let's say we can produce smokables and flowers that are at the THC level below 1%. You don't have any problem at all. You can sell them everywhere. It's all legal. We have also to be aware, I mean, Switzerland's producing like flowers like crazy. And where do they go? I mean, most of this stuff leaves Switzerland, is smuggled, let's say, for example, to Holland, to the Netherlands. And there they are spraying these artificial THC on it, and they're going to sell it as THC stuff, for example, in the Netherlands. But it has been produced legally here in Switzerland below 1%. So that's one thing. I think when it comes to smokables and flowers, it's clear in Switzerland. But for example, in Germany, we see again, I mean, this huge gap that's widening every day between theory and practice. We have been talking, for example, to the Federal Narcotics Bureau of Germany located in Bonn, asking, hey, how do we have to elaborate a hemp cigarette or even hemp flowers in order to be lawful? And the law and the answer were absolutely clear. I mean, no substance of the cannabis plant can be legally brought to the recreational market unless it's for scientific or industrial purpose, full stop. No flowers, no cannabis leaf teas, nothing. Even if there's no THC inside, it's not permitted. Okay, and then you go over to Berlin or to Munich or elsewhere, and you will find hemp teas with leaves even sold in supermarket chains. And then, okay, we went back to Bonn and asked, hey, guys, it's sold everywhere. Even flowers you can sell everywhere. And they said, hey, the theory is clear, but prosecution is in the hands of each federal state. So as the federal state of Bavaria or Berlin. And these people are treating sometimes flowers as illegal, sometimes it's legal. A colleague of mine, I mean, he has opened up 5 stores in Bavaria. Each of these stores are selling illegal stuff. Nobody cares. But if you go to another federal state, in Germany, for example, you have the problem. So, and there are similar situations in Poland and in France too. So I think even for an investor, I think it's a difficult situation because they want stability, they want law certainty, and you don't have it. It's just a daily struggle. I mean, we're selling now in Belgium, which was very hard to get the permission, and in Luxembourg it was easier. It's like in Switzerland, but for all the other countries, it's just very difficult for the recreational market.
Thank you, Roger. Very helpful overlay there. And Andrew, I'd like to direct my next question to you, but again, it's open for the rest of the panel as well. What do you see as the major bottlenecks and next steps for the Swiss hemp market?
I think, thanks, Tom. As everybody has discussed here, obviously the bottlenecks fall political. You know, as regulation is unclear, that's why we are also falling in confidence of bringing capital in or any institutional capital to help the industry grow. So as major bottlenecks is, number one is what will the EU decide on CBD, if it's going to be a narcotic or if it's going to be a novel food, whichever way it's consumed. Second, I think the major thing we're all waiting for is how will the United Nations vote on rescheduling cannabis. The other part I have is obviously, I think Yannik knows a bit more, is what will be the duration and execution like of this pilot program that is being discussed in the government, and how long will it take, how will it work out? I think it's great to make the announcement, but moving forward and creating the structure of how it's going to be delivered is another statement. And finally, I put in, as I mentioned earlier, is the access to sort of institutional capital to help support, whether it's like Peter mentioned, discussing with private health insurance, helping the patients that are currently receiving medical cannabis with funding that. And others is, as a whole, for I'm sure some of the investment audience here that is listening, to help the industry and the companies that have really moved forward and have done great things for the last 4 or 5 years. And now we are seeing this bottleneck which falls into regulation, but we need the capital to help us with lobbying or help with gaining political gain as well. So that's that I would say as a whole.
Very good. And Yannik, I'd like to direct our next question to you. What is, you mentioned Pangenome on your website. Could you tell us a bit about what Pangenome is and how it comes up in your R&D process?
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe real quick on the comments. Somehow the light keeps turning off when I'm talking, but that's all right. Real quick in the concerning comment on those from Peter. Swiss regulation is fairly clear. There's uncertainty on how it's developing across Europe, including the regulation of the CBD. However, Switzerland takes a very clear stance and pioneering role, and we also need to understand that it's not directly tied to the EU decision. So it's a island in terms of the regulations with this, be it with the 1% THC, be it with the CBD. So it's a very open field, and there's the experimental article that's already out there, and we're expecting the additional laws or enactments to be there in the next few years. And we need to kind of separate EU and Switzerland. So still a very positive attitude towards where it's moving. To your question, a pangenome is pretty much the entirety of the DNA of the cannabis plant. As a modern plant breeding facility and company, the basis to improving plants is really the understanding of its DNA, not to do GMO or CRISPR. It's a very important distinction, but only when you have read the whole DNA, so every single letter in this plant, only then it's possible, with all the data we're collecting on the field, to assign these traits, such as THCV or a terpene, so a flavor profile, to this bit of the DNA. And then understanding where this trait lies, plants can be bred. So the first step, the last 3 years, we've spent on building this pangenomic resource that captures the whole DNA of cannabis, such as it is out there for corn or for soy. And then with this basic research we conducted and having this high quality reference genome, maybe that's the name that rings a bell for you. Yeah. We can start going into the plant, acquiring all this data. Currently we have 20,000 plants out there, and from every single plant we measure how fast it grows, what yields it brings, which compounds it carries. You know, is it a CBD plant or does it produce THCV, a appetite suppressant molecule? And then connecting the dots, so all this data, pinpointing it to where it lies in the pangenome, makes it possible for our breeders to then take these interesting parents and start breeding towards a new plant. To give you an example, I talked about THCV. So this is a very promising compound. And only when somebody understands where the bit of the DNA lies in the plant for the plant to produce more THCV, only then we can breed for it fast and efficiently. And we end up with plants that only produce THCV. In Switzerland, it's a legal compound. It's appetite suppressant. And thanks to this knowledge, we were able to achieve that within less than a year. So the pangenome, together with all the plants we own, this diversity, allows us to accelerate classical breeding by years. And that's the whole work we've been doing. Took us quite a bit of time to do the basic research because cannabis was illegal in many regards. And lots of people, so around 15 scientists that work on this project. And by next year, mid-next year, we think we'll have 150 traits where we know where they lie in DNA, and we can pull those together into offspring and then produce those tailored varieties.
Thank you, Yannik. Dr. Trepp, can you give us an overview of CBD usage in Switzerland? So as an example, what % of the population is even aware of CBD, and what forms of CBD are most popular presently?
Well, the exact number we don't know really. What we have done is we have done some consumer research with about 100 CBD users, and we just were wondering what type of CBD are they actually consuming. And I think Roger has done a good job, because about half of the people who consume CBD consume it in form of cigarettes, actually, to our great surprise. And then the second most popular form is obviously the oil. And then actually the other forms like, edibles like chewing gums or capsules or pastilles are really, it's a lower share, like about 20% of the people using that form, Also, sometimes what we hear in the market, that people say that CBD products are too expensive. And actually the feedback we get from the consumer in the survey was actually they think they are just priced okay. So also for all the people who think that, we're selling it too expensive, that's a big surprise, was also for us that the price is actually okay. A really important thing is obviously the taste. Sometimes the oils also taste a little bit bitter. And I think that is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people still try to smoke, because some of the oils really have a bitter, very hempy taste, and people do not prefer to take it.
Very good.
Maybe just to touch on the things you mentioned before on quality issues. And I think what I just want to add to the panel here is also, you know, the quality issues we have in the hemp and CBD industry is really the result of the absence of clear regulation in that field, because people can just basically do whatever, you know, they can be very creative in bringing products to market under various different regulatory regimes. So I think that is also one of the results. Then what we have is then we have some quality issues in the market.
Very good. So on that note of regulatory enforcement here in the United States, I'm not saying that the regulations are perfect, they're far from it, but they're sufficient. The problem, in some respects, they're sufficient. The major short-term problem is actually enforcement of the regs that are on the book to facilitate a level playing field for those companies that are trying best to be compliant and to be good corporate citizens, if you will. So on that note, what's the situation in Switzerland relating to regulatory enforcement? How is enforcement going there?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, in our experience, I think also Sandra mentioned that before, you know, and also I think Roger, we are, you know, a confederation. So we have, every canton has its own enforcement bodies to enforce federal laws or even cantonal laws. And that results in quite a big diversity in how those local authorities actually regulate those products, even though for some parameters such as the THC, the regulations, the national regulations are quite clear. So we see that, but I think also that is also to add to the previous panelists, the confusion we have in the regulation, and because it's a very, very fluid environment. So I think what we see is that there is a convergence, I think, in my opinion, of the Swiss regulation towards what the EU is going to decide in the future. And I think then Switzerland will, in my opinion, just take over the EU regulation, so that just fall in line, maybe with a delay of a few months or so. But I think that is what is going to happen in the end. So at the moment, I think the situation is, from, you know, until we have a clear decision from the EU, we will continue to have situation in the Swiss market that local regulation can be quite diverse. But as soon as I think we have the EU decision, I think Switzerland will fall in line with EU regulation.
Very good. We have some, and thank you, Dr. Trepp, very helpful. We have questions from the audience here, but I'm going to be a bit selfish here because I have one more question I'd like to ask because, well, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this myself. Exportation, right? What does the panel, and this is an open question for the panel, so we'll end the way we started. With an open question, what insights can our panelists here provide as to exportation, what we might expect next year and in the future in regard to this subject matter?
Depends which type of products, if it's CBD or medical cannabis. I think I'm just can give my insights on CBD products. I think because also in Switzerland now, CBD extracts are regarded as novel food. If you want to export your CBD product as food in the future, we are going to have some issues at the border to be allowed to export it into various jurisdictions, because we have then to prove that the product in the target market is illegal. So, you know, this takes an extra administrative hurdle for CBD products. The good thing is, I think, on the animal field, which we haven't touched a lot tonight, but I think the promising market in the future is going to be animal health, because hemp is an approved animal feed in various forms. You know, you can produce oils, you can produce powder, you can feed fibers to animals. And I think there we have a lot of more flexibility moving, you know, towards the animal healthcare market in the future than in the human field. I think, in my opinion, outside of THC, where I'm less familiar with, I think we're going to have some issues if we try to export it as food, or maybe even some extent as cosmetics, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other insights from the panel? Thank you, Dr. Trepp. And I do want to we're not going to be able to get to all of the audience questions here, but I'd like to get to a couple of them. if the panelists are willing. Any other insights on that notion of exportation? Okay.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead, Roger, please.
That's about, I mean, if it's only, I fully agree with Gian. If you have up to 1% THC, exportation is not a problem at all. But I think the importation on the other side, that's always the thing. And what we see, for example, in Italy, whatever you want to consume legally, more or less, as a human being, you just go to a pet shop and you buy some pet food. So it's like the question is, how do you, as what kind of product do you sell it? And I think the more and more within the EU, you just have to lie on the product that you can sell it legally.
Thank you for that, Roger, and that's a helpful addition to that conversation. First, go ahead.
If I may add, because
Please.
Obviously on the exportation, there is also a notion of discussion of Switzerland becoming an export nation for THC flower, primarily as medical cannabis for the time being. And there is a notion that this could be taking place by 2022. I'm sure Yannik might have some details on that. Where you see Switzerland has developed, there is a lot of indoor cultivation for CBD flower and up to 1%. So most of the facilities, even though a few of them might be under the EU GMP, JCP quality licensing standard, they are equipped as soon as the regulation or the law states that you're able to export THC flower to do that at a very high quality standard medical cannabis for export, whether that's, I mean, we are in the center of Europe, so whether that's going to Italy or Germany or any of the other medical cannabis jurisdictions. So, I mean, I see, Switzerland positioning itself slowly as the medical or as the cannabis hub of Europe.
Thank you, Andrew, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
I can only second to that, Andrew. So with the only, say, difference that probably is not by next year, it's going to take a bit longer, but it looks very, very promising, the current parliamentary discussions and the outlook thereof. And naturally, people can also expect as an export product, licensed varieties, licensed traits that we are breeding and developing. So we do in vitro, we have all the export permits, and we've managed to ship pretty much worldwide. So just to expand on the types of products that are or could be exported from Switzerland, that's something I want to add.
Thank you, Yannik. Very helpful insight. And Doctor, please go ahead, Dr. Schoenes.
Just adding to the export potential for Switzerland, I think also the production or development of finished medicinal cannabis products, so phytopharmaceuticals. I think if now the regulation are also going to become easier to get authorization for such products, I think that's also an opportunity for Switzerland to become a leader. So doing research in that area, produce high quality phytopharmaceuticals, as a reputation of pharmaceutical companies. I think that's also something that Switzerland can become a very a good hub for exporting, and obviously also for the local market. Yeah.
Very good, Doctor. And I do want to get in one question from the audience here, and I apologize that we've gone a bit over here, but I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. I'm going to look here to a question about testing standards. This is this question asked regarding testing standards for extracts in the Swiss market. Where do they stand in comparison to Health Canada using and the Cannabis Act there, using Canada as a baseline? And that's an open question for the panel. Do we have anyone who wants to take that question on regarding testing standards?
Well, I'm a little bit familiar with Canadian testing standards, but I'm not really the ultimate expert on those testing standards. But I have a great familiarity with herbal medicinal products. And there are two elements to the testing standards. One is clearly THC and CBD. which need to be tested in a validated laboratory using validated methods. But then also we have all the testing standards which relate to, you know, pesticides, heavy metals, etc., which are common problems in herbal medicinal products, or even, you know, herbal food supplements for that matter. And for those elements, there are very, very clear thresholds already defined. And I think most companies in Switzerland apply to those testing standards already today, I would think. Maybe that's also for Yannik to say, because they are producing these extracts. But I would, assuming that they are adhering to those standards, relating also to Canadian levels.
Very good. And we are out of time, which is disappointing to me, because we do have quite a number of interesting questions from the audience here. But given that we've run out of time here, I want to thank my panelists. That was a sensational conversation. Greatly appreciate the varied insight here, and also want to thank Global Go, our host Paul Rosen, and all of the audience members for attending today. Thank you very much. And at this point, I'll go ahead and sign off as moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, I think that was, I'm a self-confessed cannabis geek. I love the policy. I love the complication, to be honest. Part of the reasons I love the industry as a participant is it is very complicated, and it's also an incredible, we'll call it once in a generation or beyond opportunity. And anyone that was not paying attention to Switzerland, if they attended today, they're paying attention, because this country in many ways is at a leading edge as a nascent cannabis economy. You know, when we started Global Go, Tom, myself, and our fellow partners, it was all about finding opportunity and then managing the risk, which is kind of what we do as entrepreneurs. We look for opportunity, we manage risk. And there's so many questions that were asked by our engaged audience today that we did not have time to get to. And I think we could have just kept talking, quite frankly, for hours. We wouldn't have exhausted all the questions on our list. So that engagement really means a lot to me, to tell all the panelists that you're providing incredible content that you really can't find anywhere else. We're so grateful for your insight, your experience, your leadership, and your wisdom. And for all the questioners that did not hear their questions addressed or have additional questions, it's not complicated or hard to reach any of the panelists or to reach myself or my colleagues at Global Go. We're partly built for that kind of mission. I see a whole number of questions asked that we would, I think, be in a good position to answer credibly and responsibly. So reach out to all of us or any of us. And until next time, this is Paul Rosen. I just want to quickly thank our sponsors. Could you imagine if I forgot to thank our sponsors? There'd be no more sponsors. That's the law firm Zuber, Lawler, and Del Duca, CFN Media Group, Fineleaf, our great colleague Andrew, Heidi's Garden, Pure Holdings, AG, and lastly, Medcan. Thank you to the sponsors. Without your generosity, I'm not sure we'd be able to host today. We'd figure out a way, but we're still better with you. Meanwhile, to the panelists, to our moderator, thank you so much for an incredible platform and a tremendous amount of useful information. Until next time, I'm Paul. Thank you.